some members of the Viet Minh were reluctant to accept the ceasefire agreement. Their main concern was the division of Vietnam into two sections. However, Ho Chi Minh argued that this was only a temporary situation and was convinced that in the promised general election, the Vietnamese would elect a communist government to rule a reunited Vietnam. This view was shared by President Dwight Eisenhower. As he wrote later, "I have never talked or corresponded with a person knowledgeable in Indo-Chinese affairs who did not agree that had elections been held at the time of the fighting, possibly 80% of the population would have voted for the communist Ho Chi Minh." When the Geneva Conference took place in 1954, the United States delegation proposed the name of Ngo Dinh Diem as the new ruler of South Vietnam. The French argued against this, claiming that Diem was not only incapable, but mad. However, eventually it was decided that Diem presented the best opportunity to keep South Vietnam from falling under the control of communism. When it became clear that Diem had no intention of holding elections for a united Vietnam, his political opponents began to consider alternative ways of obtaining their objectives. Some came to the conclusion that violence was the only way to persuade Diem to agree to the terms of the 1954 Geneva Conference. Ho Chi Minh was initially against this strategy. He argued that the opposition forces in South Vietnam should concentrate on organizing support rather than carrying out attacks of terrorism against Diem's government. In 1959, Ho Chi Minh sent Le Duan, a trusted advisor, to visit South Vietnam. Le Duan returned to inform his leader that Diem's policy of imprisoning the leaders of the opposition was so successful that unless North Vietnam encouraged armed resistance, a united country would never be achieved. Ho Chi Minh agreed to supply the guerrilla units with aid. He also encouraged the different armed groups to join together and form a more powerful and effective resistance organization. This they agreed to do, and in December 1960, the National Front for the Liberation of South Vietnam, NLF, was formed. The NLF, or the Viet Cong, as the Americans were to call them, was made up of over a dozen different political and religious groups. Although the leader of the NLF, Hoa To, was a non-Marxist and a Saigon lawyer, large numbers of the movement were supporters of communism. The strategy and tactics of the NLF were very much based on those used by Mao in China. The initial objective of the NLF was to gain the support of the peasants living in the rural areas. According to Mao Zedong, the peasants were the sea in which the guerrillas needed to swim. When the NLF entered a village, they obeyed a strict code of behavior that gained the trust of the villagers, as opposed to the harsh treatment of the Saigon army and taxmen.